Friends, hello and welcome. My name is Sam Heath, and I'm with Equal Justice USA. Sometimes I keep the song going a little extra long if it's good, and I was really feeling the Bon Iver today. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And this is our first official international webinar. We've got a Londoner born and bred here. We'll talk more about that and all the things that I'm excited to learn and to share with you all today. But again, my name is Sam Heath, and this is a webinar and podcast series we've been doing for about 3 years, and we call it In the Movement. And the goal here is for us to engage and elevate work in the justice movement and to talk with those on the ground doing that work and to learn what is this work? What does it look like? And especially, what does this mean, not only for, but especially for Christians? So I work with Equal Justice USA, and here in the US, we're a national nonprofit, and we do work around community safety. Our goal is to help communities think about how can we respond to harm without first or only relying on police and prisons, and especially punishment. What does it look like to respond in ways that heal or ways that restore? And that's really the theme of what we're looking at today, this idea of restoration, especially as it relates to youth and especially within an educational context. Youth and incarceration, it's a big topic here within the US, and it's not something that we do particularly well because of the frame. Our mass incarceration system, at least in the US, I'll speak for us, is based off of fear. And often the way we engage youth is rooted in fear. And we other people and we other youth and set them aside rather than thinking through a lens of restoration. And so I stumbled sort of upon the work of Oasis and the things that are happening. And Steve Chalke is here, and he's going to talk about his work, the beginnings of Oasis, the beginnings of something called Oasis Restore. And there's a lot that we're going to walk through today. But Steve, I'll credit you were mentioned in one of Shane Claiborne's books, and I reached out to Shane and said, Shane, can you connect me? And he did, and we had a couple great conversations that
Yeah.
brought us here. But give a brief intro of yourself, and then let's dive into all the things.
Oh, well, first of all, everyone, it's thanks for asking me to be part of this. It's a great theme, and well done for exploring it together. Yeah, my name's Steve. I'm a Baptist minister. I became a Christian when I was 14. I was born in South London. Oh, God, that's why I got this accent. And on the night I became a Christian, I won't bore you with the story. It's long and complicated and was mostly about a church I went to and a youth group because there was a girl that I fell in love with. She was 15, I was 14. One night she told me I was ugly. I walked home alone and crestful. And it was on that evening on my way home, I thought to myself, well, I'm not going back to that church youth group, it was, because it's embarrassing. But what happened was next. I thought, but the story they tell me there about who I am, that I'm made by God, that my life's got potential, it's got meaning, it's got purpose. Wow, I like that story. And it's a lot better than the story that my school tells me. They always told me I'd not do much with my life and, I'd work with my hands, not my head, etc. And so I decided I would, even if Mary, the girl that just told me I wasn't good enough for her, didn't want me, I'd go back the next week. And then an extraordinary thing happened. I decided if I'm going to go back, well, I'm going to believe this story, so I'll be a Christian. If I'm going to be a Christian, I should be a church leader. And if I'm going to be a church leader, what I should do with my life is set up a house for kids that no one cares about, kicked out on the streets or in trouble, and give them new hope, and a school that's worth going to, and a hospital to bring healthcare to people. And the rest of my life, you can see I'm a lot older than that now, has been the playing out of that, really. I trained as a Baptist minister. I'm a Baptist minister. I left the church that I worked for as a youth worker to start Oasis 40 years ago. I set up with my wife, who had just married, a home for kids off the street. She said, why don't we call this Oasis? Because we're creating Oasis for these kids. And so we set up a charity called Oasis, and it's grown ever since then. So it works in various countries around the world, but here in the UK, where I spend most of my time, we run 54, 55 schools. We've got 33,000 children in our schools,
Hmm.
age 2 through to age 19. We run a whole group of churches, actually, now community churches. We run loads and loads of supported housing for young people who've got nowhere to go. We're involved in healthcare, in hospitals, etc., etc. But the project you asked me about when we
Hmm.
met
Hmm.
brings all of this together, actually, because after 14 years of work with the government, by the way, that's why I'm dressed up in a suit today. I don't wander around wearing a suit.
It's all right. We talked about it. I have at least buttons, I said, but you beat me with the collar.
I've got to go into Parliament, our Parliament, a little bit later. Perhaps we talk about that story because it's for a good reason, but you still have to put a suit on to go there. But yeah, so after a 14-year discussion with government, they changed the law in this country to allow Oasis to run a custodial establishment for young
Mm,
people. So we call this Oasis Restore, as you mentioned, Sam, and it's a therapeutic alternative to a youth jail for kids who've committed serious violent crime all the way up to 18. And that means murder, attempted murder, rape,
mm,
etc.
mm,
So we opened that last year,
mm,
in August last year. It 14 years of hard work to get there, but it's the first time in Britain, they tell me it's the first time in the world, but I don't know if that's true, that a charity, a not-for-profit,
hmm.
has been allowed to take what would have been the responsibility of the government, and a court can sentence a young person to us, and we offer them a different hope.
Mm.
Oasis Restore. We're not penal, we're about restoration, but
Yeah.
these kids have committed serious crime.
Wow. There's so much you just shared with your story, but I'm struck by it began with a broken heart. And so, so much came out of that. I didn't know if the story was going to turn and say, then you went back and the girl changed her mind and that's your wife today. But it's a lovely story without
I
this.
still know her, actually, Mary.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, yeah. No, so I often tell this story, the story I've told you, because that's how Oasis started, So I have to tell it, and she always says, "You've made me famous."
She'll take it.
And I thank her for thinking I was ugly, because just imagine if she'd not said that to me, my life wouldn't have turned out this way.
Yeah.
Strange.
Yeah. What a crossroads. I mean, but I hear part of what you're saying. Some of what you were longing for and hadn't experienced is what you wanted to build in here. This safe place of a school, a place to care for people with a hospital in their bodies, a place to provide housing. These things that are essentials in order to get at the root cause of any kind of trauma. So maybe let's start here. It, I also have heard I saw on the website, heard you talk about it. It's England's first ever secure school,
Yes.
and certainly the first one that a charity is able to run. So, how, if you had to nail down what is it that sets it apart from other schools and the way that you approach the youth there,
Okay.
what is that? Is it
Well,
actions? Is it a philosophy? How do you distinguish it from a regular old school?
yeah, it's all of those things. So it's called a
Mm,
secure school, which is its legal name, but it's actually an alternative to a youth jail. If young people are not sentenced, I don't like that word, I don't use it.
mm,
That's what the courts used. If they don't come to us, which is the court's decision, they will end up in a jail,
mm,
in a cell, with bars, on a wing, with guards, with uniforms, with jangling keys, etc., etc., steel doors, iron doors that clang, etc.
mhm,
So it's a traumatizing experience for a person who's been traumatized all their life, because, as a guess, we all know that the young people in Britain, and I know it's true in the States as well, that we lock up are young people who've had the worst starts in life.
mhm,
They're young people who've not been loved, not been cared for, not been
mhm,
seen, not been heard, not felt secure, not been safe, not been soothed. They're young people who've had a terrible start in life, and
mm.
then we we punish them.
Right.
We punish them for the start that society's not been able to give them. So they're the young people we work with. So the truth is, we chose to call it Oasis Restore.
Mm,
but it's legally called a secure school. And what
Okay.
it does in relationship to my story is it is first and foremost, it's called a secure school, it's a secure
Mm.
housing. I'll tell you what it looks like. Secondly, there's a huge health centre there.
Mm.
And thirdly, it is a school. So it is a home, a place of education, a
Hmm.
place of liberation and hope, and a place of healthcare, both physical and mental healthcare. So that's what we're doing with and for young people. And in one sense, it's a fulfillment of the whole vision of Oasis all in one big place.
Mm.
So, what marks it apart from a jail? There are no bars, there are no cells, there are no wings and wards, there are no uniforms, there are no guards. Instead, you live in a student flat. It's like going to college. You have there's you have a window with glass. It's unbreakable glass, so you can't kill yourself with it because a lot of the young people, well, pretty well all of the young people come to us hate themselves.
Mm.
They hate themselves when they arrive. But it's a therapeutic environment. So there's a good bed. I invited a lot of my friends to come and spend a night sleeping in the bedroom before we opened. And my theory was, if I can't sleep on this bed, then why should I expect anyone else to be able to? Um, the walls are decorated in a way that your home would be. What's great about the end of the day when you sit down in your lounge? You sit on a chair that you can relax in,
Hmm.
surrounded by colors that are soothing, etc., etc.
Yeah.
It's not like going to an emergency department in a hospital with fluorescent light and bright paint and polished floors that's cold and clinical but gets you on edge. So we've created an environment that's therapeutic, and then all of our work is therapeutic. So instead of guards, there are youth workers, teachers, and health staff. Um, the young people who come to us aren't cases, they're not numbers, they're not convicts,
Mm-hmm.
they're, they're young people who we
Hmm.
love and we
Hmm.
work with. So, so it's both the environment and the
Hmm.
practice that's different. It's therapeutic.
And that's a massive difference from often how I hear trauma informed being spoken of here in the States. Often it's paint colors and things in the environment, which are important, but often it stops there and doesn't filter into the programs, the rhythms, the people, and especially to your point of these are individuals, these are humans, not just cases, not just numbers. Why did it take 14 years to get to this point? What was the resistance to something that sounds so important and so helpful?
The resistance was bureaucracy.
Mm.
Basically, I guess you got a fair bit of that in the States as well. But I mean, we got heaps of it, heaps and heaps and heaps. We're probably world experts in bureaucracy and not getting things done, no obfuscation. So what actually happened was it was 14 and a half, going on for 15 years ago now, actually, that I sat and I met a government minister who told me I asked him what he did, and he said, I am the Lord Chancellor. In England, we give people funny names for everything. It's nothing
Great
straightforward.
titles.
Yeah. So I said, the Lord Chancellor, what does a Lord Chancellor do? And he looked at me as though I was daft, and he said, I'm the minister in charge of justice. I'm otherwise known as the Secretary of State for Justice. And I said, oh, you should have said that. That's a lot clearer. And then I said, you got a tough job, haven't you? Because there's not much justice. What we do is we punish the poor
Mm.
in this country. Where you get in life, it's just a fact about Britain. Right? The biggest factor in how far you get in life, how well you succeed at school, what kind of salary you get, what kind of home you live in, what kind of friends you have, and what your life expectancy is. Do you know what the biggest factor is? The income of your parents.
Mm.
So we talk about equality and
Hmm.
we talk about leveling up in this country, equality.
Hmm.
We talk a big game, but the fact of the matter is that it's your parents' income that is the biggest predictor of your life
Mm.
outcome. And um, and so I got into a discussion about that. And then he asked me to write a paper, and we wrote a paper. And then they took about 6 months to reply. And then they asked us in for a meeting. And then we had the meeting. And then about 2 years went by, and they didn't contact us. Then they contacted us again, and it went on like that. And
Wow.
then finally, when this opportunity actually arose, we had to bid for it in the end, and write an application that was 200 pages long, um, 230 something, as I remember. And then we went for interview, and then finally we got the job. And then it still took 5 years to set up after that
Mm.
in terms of building, training, equipping, working through exactly how we were going to, write down exactly how we're going to spend every day,
Mm.
recognizing that these young people want to take their own lives when
Hmm.
they first come to us. So, how do we create a system of safety for each one of them? What do we do about safeguarding for our staff, for them, for other children, etc.? All of
Hmm.
that. That's why it took 14 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, the juggernaut of government goes slow.
I believe it. I believe we have some to a lot of that here within the states. I meant to say this at the beginning. I want to make sure everybody listening hears that if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. You can also put them in the Q&A feature. We'll save some time at the end to answer anything that you have for Steve or about Oasis Restore. And so be sure to put those in, and you can put them in as we talk. Steve, there's something else that I've heard you say in another context that's really key to Oasis Restore, that you all believe that children are different than adults. So
Yeah.
all the things that you're saying are things that are incredibly helpful for a human at any point. How are those things especially helpful for youth? Or in what are ways that you intentionally are engaging youth in a way that you would do differently than if they were adults?
Well, if we were working in the adult justice system, we'd work in one sense in exactly the same way. We believe in healing.
Mm.
You know, therapy is an ancient Greek word in the New Testament. It simply means healing,
Hmm.
and trauma is a transliteration of an old Greek word which means wound. And I would say that every experience in life is either traumatizing, wounding, or therapeutic, healing. Every relationship, every phone call, every text message, every event you ever go to, every relationship you're in is wounding or healing, sometimes a combination of the both. So all of our work with young people or older people who've fallen into the justice system needs to be healing.
Mm.
Not only does that make sense therapeutically, not only does it make sense socially, but it also makes sense for a country economically. Because
Mm.
to
Hmm.
put somebody who's been denied love, denied care, etc., into a prison cell, to leave them there for however many years, to let them out occasionally, to let them waste away, that just increases their anger or their fear, etc.
Hmm.
And the result of that is that when you release them, they are more of a danger to themselves and society. Locking people up, throwing the key away, and then letting them out doesn't make society safer and
Right.
doesn't aid the economy. It costs the economy in terms of reoffending and policing and healthcare, etc. And it's not at all redemptive for the person. So what we have had does not work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, this is different. This is different because the sentence is the punishment, which is handed out by the courts.
Hmm.
What we are up to is is working with a person. I was asked by a government minister what our strategy was. And I said, it's love. And he looked at me very shocked. And he said, and what? I said, and nothing really. I said, you could say relentless love, which he thought was mamby-pamby. He thought was
Mm,
soft. My point is that locking a child or an adult in a cell for 20 hours a day or whatever it is, that's soft. All you've got to have is the
right.
ability to turn the key.
Right.
What's tough is sitting with someone who doesn't like themselves and has been taught through life that no one else likes them, and sticking with them and hearing them and listening to them and seeing them and building relationship with them so that they begin to come to a place where their emotions and their responses change and they open up and they begin to deal with the trauma that they have lived through. Now, what's different about children or young people and adults is that prevention is better than cure and cheap
Mm-hmm.
cure, as we've said. And the earlier in life that you work with people, the better it is.
Right.
And an adolescent's brain is not fully formed. We don't allow, I mean, it varies from country to country, but we don't allow a 14-year-old to drive a motor vehicle. We don't allow them to vote. We don't allow them to get married. We don't allow them to drink alcohol. There are good reasons for all of that. Their brains are not yet developed to the point where they can make wise judgments and think about the implications of those judgments and the
Mm-hmm.
complications that may come about, the fallout. And yet, in Britain and in some states in America, as you know, we take a child and we hold them fully responsible and accountable for all their behaviors, even though we may know their history. They've
Yeah.
not been loved, they've not been cared for, they've not been looked after. And we punish them, as I said, for what isn't their fault. So to work with a child therapeutically doesn't just make sense for them because the anger, um, that's that look, it looks like aggression,
Right.
but it's lostness.
Right.
It's searching for love and hope, which we all need. And this, of course, changes the shape of a human brain. So my idea around, or it's not my idea, is it? The idea around therapeutic care, it's not an opinion. It's
Mm-hmm.
just plain science. It's the
Right.
facts. Because we got the MRI scanner, we can look in a brain and we know this works and we know the other stuff doesn't. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we do it. It works with anyone, but it works with children and young people faster than it works with adults.
Mm-hmm. I saw one phrase on the website that really stuck out to me, and it talked about at Oasis Restore that there's a passion to include. Why is that aspect of inclusion so important? Given all that you just said, why is that piece key? And what does inclusion look like at Oasis Restore?
So inclusion is the badge of the whole of Oasis. If you look at
Mm,
one of our websites, you'll see that Oasis is spelt with what we call a messy O at the beginning. It's many-stranded, and it's the symbol that we are inclusive. Everybody's in, everyone counts. So that in our schools, in our housing, in our community work, wherever we work,
mm,
that's what we're about. And of course, why is everyone in? Because everybody, I believe, is made in God's image. Every last person, everyone, every male, every female, everyone is made in God's image. And I think that's one of the radical things about Christianity and Judaism. And the second thing to say about that is that as followers of Christ, we believe in redemption. There's nothing that's unforgivable. There's
mhm,
nothing that puts you beyond the pale, or at least not through the eyes of someone who's following in the pathway of Jesus.
mhm,
Therefore, therapeutic care and healing strikes me that if you listen to the stories of Jesus and read the stories of Jesus, that's constantly what he did, isn't it? He was doing this with everyone all of the time, with everyone he met. it actually became what upset religious leaders so badly.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
couldn't stand the fact that he included people in who they thought were disqualified. His anger and frustration was saved only for them, the blind guides who tried to shut the kingdom and the goodness and the shalom of God out from other people. So that's what guides us.
Mm.
It's what inclusion is for us.
Yeah, well, it sounds like such a key piece.
Mm,
So let's talk some of the specifics and the logistics. There's several questions coming in that are getting at some of the nuances of what a day in the life at Oasis Restore looks like. So can you talk about the size of it, how many students are there, how many staff
mm,
are there? And then some people, it sounds like, are wondering, what does it look like to safeguard both students that are there as well as the staff and yet maintain this environment without bars and guards and weapons?
mm. So all our staff are highly trained in therapeutic care,
Hmm.
and they are trained in the situation where they need to step in and calm a child, calm a young person. The biggest number of our students are age 15, 16, 17, up to their 18th birthday. The training is intense. The selection of our staff is really important. When we're full, which will be this August,
Hmm.
we will house 48 young people in these student flats, and we're working towards that. We're building intentionally through the time. How is a day spent? You live in a student flat. You live in a bedroom. Your bedroom is locked at 10 at night. That's for your safety. Many of the young people that are with us, they've never been able to sleep safely before. So
Mm.
the fact that their bedroom door is locked, we check on them every 15 minutes through the night, and more frequently for a child that we know to be at risk for some reason to themselves,
Hmm.
but their bedrooms are comfortable. They go to bed when you'd expect a teenager to go to bed, and they get up at about 7:30, and they have breakfast in their houses before getting stuck into the day. And the day consists of learning. All our learning is by stage, not age,
Hmm.
because you may have a 15-year-old with the math skills or the language skills of a 5-year-old.
Mm.
You may have a 15-year-old with genius math skills. And so, in the first few weeks that a young person is with us, uh, all of our work with them is to assess with them where they are and what their goals are for the time they're with us. The time they're with us varies, of course, depending on why they're with us.
Hmm.
Some young people are with us on remand, they're awaiting trial. Some young people are with us because they've been involved in a serious crime, a
Hmm.
violent crime, but they weren't the central perpetrator. In the UK, we have something which means that if you're part of a group that commits a serious crime, you may be arrested yourself, etc. Some of our young people are with us, and they're going to be not just with us until they're 18, but then they will go into the adult state and they will be in prison for the next 10 or 15 or more years. So we're working with different young people with
Hmm.
different educational needs,
Hmm.
of different ages and from different stages and from different backgrounds. Our staffing cohort, when we're totally full, will be around 230. So that's kind of four staff plus a little bit to every child. But of course, some of those staff are maintenance or except
Hmm.
administrative staff, reception staff. But the active staff with young people is about 4 to 1, and that's because we're open 24 hours of every day,
Mhm.
7 days of
Mhm.
every week, and 365 days of every year.
Mhm.
We're open on Christmas Day. We're open on Easter Day. No one's going home. Uh, we're there and steady. We're there through the night with them, which is a vulnerable moment for them.
Mhm. Mhm. Hugely so. One person in the chat was talking about the restorative justice programs or groups with a restorative approach, like what you're talking about. We know are really successful. The person said, "How do we combat cuts to these programs?" And if that's the U.S., it might start with electing a different president. But to get it maybe more specific for you all, what does it look like to pursue and protect funding for this over the long term? Is that as vulnerable for you in England as it feels like for some of these programs here in the U.S.?
It's really vulnerable the whole time. When
Mm,
I began Oasis, I left my job as a youth worker, a youth minister in a church, um, and everybody told me it was stupid. I had no income. I was 29. I knew no one. Um, my wife trusted me.
mm,
And the question was, will I have to get another job at the end of this month? And then it got to, I think we got enough money to get through to Christmas. I left in September. And then it got to, I think we'll make it till next summer, and et cetera, et cetera. But it was me in a room really. Now in this country, Oasis employs almost 6,000 people, a huge number of expert people who've got skills and insights and brains that are far better and faster than mine. But I've learned, what have I learned through that time? I've learned that if you have a clear sense of vision and purpose, your true north, and
mm,
you do not give up because it's God given, it comes from inside you. And if you surround yourself with people who are sharper than you are, with skills that you don't have, and if you're willing to acknowledge the skills that you don't have and listen to others, I think a lot of entrepreneurs find it hard to listen.
mm,
And it's a balance of having vision, but building around you people that you don't abuse, but instead they're not there to serve you. You are there to serve them and the vision. And I've found over the years that the battle for funding and sustainability never, ever, ever, ever goes away.
mm,
But if you keep at it, if you don't give up, if you work with what you've got, then people come and see the thing that you're doing. And because
mhm,
they see the thing that you're doing, they trust you a bit more for something else. And then you do that and they trust you for something else and they trust you for something else. When I set up Oasis, I wanted to set up a hostel, supported housing, a house, a school, and I had this mad idea of a hospital. Um, Oasis is much bigger than that now, but I think that part of it is seeing the thing that's ahead of you. I decided setting up a house would be easiest first.
mhm,
Seeing the thing that's ahead of you, and no one will give to me. No one would even answer my letters. It took years to get this thing up. It was like wading through treacle. It was so lonely an experience, so frustrating an experience. But you get there and you deliver, then some people want to be your friends. And
mhm, mhm,
then they're more ready to trust you. And so you grow and grow and grow in that way.
mhm, mhm.
Does that make sense?
It does. It sounds, I mean, I hear so much of what you're saying is that it's based on relationships and that's the heart of it. But sometimes getting those in the beginning feels impossible and can take years. And again, in the US, we are familiar with the bureaucracy that it takes to work through all of that.
It takes years, and you get to know one bureau. It's just happened to me this afternoon, actually. I got to know one guy in it. I've got to know him over the last 2 years, and just heard he's leaving. So that you get the churn in government, not just
Mm,
Oz governments come and go, but you get
hmm
journey in what we call the civil service. You know, the officers that work alongside government, they get promoted, they leave, etc. They seem over here, I'm sure you're better in the States, they seem to have no organizational memory. So you think you've
Mm-hmm.
established things and you've covered ground and it's been agreed between you, but then a new bunch arrive and they can't remember.
Yeah.
And no, and you go, so it's like sometimes it's not just two steps forward and one step back. It's sometimes one step forward and half a dozen back. But you keep on going, driven by your faith.
Mm-hmm.
For me, driven by my faith and my understanding of what the Lord's Prayer is, to tell you the
Mm-hmm.
truth. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth. Jesus said, every time you pray, just pray that. Just do that. Live it, in other words, not just
Mm-hmm.
say it. Amen. I'll push off and do something else while you sort that out, God.
Mm-hmm.
It is worth saying, I don't know if you know this, that the term amen doesn't mean over to you or we agree or anything like that, actually. It's from the Hebrew for the Hebrew noun for a midwife. Same word, actually. So when I say, this is our prayer, and I say
Mm-hmm.
amen, I'm saying I'll carry that, I'll nurse that, we
Mm-hmm.
midwife that, we see that into being. It's an active thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find is that if you set out a vision, and I know it's easy for me to say, but I know the pain of this. Yeah, I know the frustration of this. I know the agony of this. And for any of you who are listening who are entrepreneurial people, I, I've got some bad news for you. It's incurable. It's like a disease that's incurable. You can't escape this vision that you've got. It haunts you. It won't let you go. You can be anywhere, can't you? You can be sitting in a bar with some friends or watching a film or you're on a holiday, but your head is in how do we get from where we are to where we need to be? Um, so vision is the same thing as frustration. I say that to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But if you stick with it, the frustration drives you, and slowly things begin to fall into place. Hardly ever on time, hardly
Mm-hmm.
ever perfectly. There's always another hoop, another hurdle, but my experience has been that through the years.
So I know there's a lot of overlap with Oasis as a whole in the government within England, but specifically with Oasis Restore, someone in the chat was asking, is it explicitly Christian? If so, how so? And if so, how does that work? Because in America, church and state, that separation's a big thing. So what does that aspect of it look like for you all?
Well, the church and state separation in the US. Let me tell you, I was in Philadelphia last week. Yeah, a week ago. I came back
Mm,
from Philadelphia. The World Cup's coming to America, as you probably all know, soccer next year. You know,
mm-hmm,
and so I was meeting with various institutions. I've got Reverend on the front of my name. So I can't hide the fact that I'm a Christian. What I often find is, well, let me answer it from this country. So we're working on a big campaign for the World Cup in America. Why are we doing that? Because Oasis has an anti-trafficking wing. Once you host a worldwide sporting event, it's a trafficker's daydream. That's what they're longing for, and they are planning for, because they will use people as slaves. They will use women as sexual slaves, et cetera, through all of this. So, Oasis has always been involved in real stuff. I'll tell you a story and then I'll answer the question about how evangelistic we are. We're very evangelistic in that the term evangel means good news. We're good news bringers, but evangelistic Christians, evangelicals, are often bad news bringers. Aren't they? We come to judge you. I was
right.
talking to one yesterday. I was talking to one yesterday who was telling a group of people they were going to go to hell. I said to him, that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
sound like very good news, does it? And it's not really very accurate. You should go away and do a bit of hermeneutics. That's why I said to him, but I think I do think this. The last time I was asked to be on national British radio was earlier today. I couldn't do it because I had some meetings. The next time I'm going to be on British national TV is next Monday night, I think. A big program that's been filmed, that's been made about some of the work that we do. I'm going to be on with Jamie Oliver, actually. You know
Mm.
that, Jamie
Hmm.
and I.
That's right. We before we started, we had a quick talk about British Bake Off, and right now
So,
it's funny. That's the lens that I'm seeing everything through with my kids because we're watching it right now.
right. So the thing is this, I find that if you're authentic in your faith and you're not preaching at people, if you're loving them, Jesus said, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. He didn't say love God and preach at people. Um, so he loved people. He said, follow me, didn't he? Constantly, 84 times, I think, are recorded in the Gospels. Follow me, do what I do, live this way, live, live in a way that subverts the way the rest of the world does. It's not about power, it's about love. It's about relationship, as you've said, Sam. And I find that if you do that, people trust you.
Mm-hmm.
People trust you. So they'll ask, and what, and they, so I've never found any barrier once I know people to the fact that I'm a Christian. At the beginning, I remember the first hostel we set up. I went to see the head of housing in that part of the government, the local government, and he said, "We don't want you to set up any housing here." This was nearly 40 years ago. And I said, why not? And he said, well, first of all, you're a Christian. We don't like Christians. Secondly, you're the worst form of Christian. You're an evangelical. And thirdly, you're the worst form of evangelical because you're a reverend. So you'll do this over my dead body.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is that I said to him, well, I said, the reality is we care about people. I'm not who you think I am. We're not who, well, it was only me. So I kind of, but we are going to do this. Um, Fast forward all those years later, about 10 years later, uh, the that same local government said to us, "Do you know the housing you run for young people is the best that we've got in the whole of our area, in our local government area? It's the best. You get much better results than we get." And that was about 10 years later. And about 10 years ago, the same local government came to us and they said, will you run all of the housing facilities for 16-year-olds plus across our whole area? So we now run all of that for them. So some of it's about trust, isn't it? I
Mm-hmm.
don't blame
Mm-hmm.
that guy for thinking I was going to come at him with a Bible and preach at him and tell him he was going to hell and look down at him. But it was as he saw who we actually were, that we live out this good news, that everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you know, we are we are close partners with that local government.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and again, I mean, that theme of it's taking time and it taking relationships is there.
Yeah, there's a question that says, do taxes support our evangelism? We don't do evangelism. Right? That's the problem. If I come
Mm,
to you and I think, Sam, I'm the right kind of Christian, you're an atheist. Or I think, Sam, I'm the right kind of Christian, you're the wrong kind of Christian. I'm a born
mhm,
again Christian, you're a Catholic Christian, you're a this Christian, you're a liberal, you're not Christian. I don't think that. I honestly do not think that. I think that the Bible starts not with original sin. I think that's a misunderstanding, by the way, of the Adam and Eve story altogether. We can talk about that if you like. But the Bible starts with original goodness.
mm,
God looked at us all. Humanity they're very good. It's very good. I love people. I like people. And I go on a journey with people. We go on a journey with people. And some of them get drawn in and they find faith. They really do. Hundreds of them, thousands probably, lots of them. But some people don't. But it's my job to judge them. It's my job to love them.
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
And
Well,
there's no law against that. And that's not
mhm,
proselytizing. Does
mhm.
does that make sense?
It makes great sense. I'm not sure within the United States we've got we've got unfortunately as much room for that. But what you're saying is practical. You're walking through life with others, you're sharing life with others, and they
Yeah.
see things and some are excited about it and some aren't. But again,
Yeah.
it's that relationship
Yeah.
that's center.
Yeah, and so your church state divide, if forgive me as a Brit saying this, I understand it. I've worked in the States for ages, but that's why I tell you the story about the World Cup.
Mm,
Nobody said, "Oh, there's a church-state divide here. I'm sorry, we can't do this."
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Because we come with an expertise around. I worked for the United Nations for 8 years as their special advisor on human trafficking. I don't do that anymore. But why was I appointed by the UN? Because of the work we did with trafficked people in India. I'm partly Indian. My dad was Indian, my mum English. Um, we work in India and do anti-trafficking work now in several countries around the world. And we work with crime agencies. We work alongside the FBI, for instance, tracking down gangs, and rather than the pawns that are caught up in the whole thing. Now, if you do work, people want to work with you.
mm-hmm,
If your only interest is getting people to pray a prayer and get them over some imaginary line so that God will love them instead of have wrath for them, well, I wouldn't work with you anyway because I don't. You see, I wouldn't work with you because if we're doing education, let's do education. If we're doing justice, let's do justice. If we're doing healthcare, let's do healthcare. Let's do it all from I, my, our faith. I'm talking about Oasis, but my faith, it's the foundation of everything I do. I hope, whether I'm talking to you, Sam, or talking with you guys, or getting on with life in some other way. There's no
mm-hmm,
divide, and my language isn't different. Hopefully, when I'm talking with you, as if I'm talking to the Prime Minister.
mm-hmm. One of the things that draws me in the most with restorative justice or with restorative spaces is the aspect of it or the degree to which it's a piece of common grace. You set up environments in these ways, these places of safety, you welcome people in, you create a hospitable place. And most often, most people move towards that because that's something that they want. That's not exclusive to Christianity, but that's a way that we can certainly express it and that's driven by it. But those things are attractive to so many people because I think people are longing for that and not finding that in so many spaces. So it feels exceptional to see it.
Human beings are made for a relationship. I mean, Homo sapiens have been on Earth for around 200,000 years, as we know. And our brains, scientifically, we know this isn't an opinion again, this is scientific fact, neuroscience, brain science. Our brains are adapted to community, small community. We need to be known. We need to know. We
Mhm.
need to be
Mhm.
understood. We need to belong. We're made for relationship.
Mhm.
Um, when Jesus said, "Love God and love your neighbor the way you love yourself," and by the way, this is it. These two great commands sum everything else up. Just do this. Everything else is commentary. You know, when he did, as I had to do a broadcast for the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, earlier this week, one morning, and that's what I actually said.
Mhm.
I said, so there's the neuroscience, but hey, 2 millennia ago, Jesus, the man who I follow, said, love your neighbor the way you love yourself. You're made for community. I said, so we're now discovering scientifically why all that's so important. But the
Mhm.
truth is, we all know it's always been so important. So I find that if you work with people relationally, you bring people with you. If
Mhm.
you imagine
Mhm.
yourself to be something better or different to them, you struggle to do that, which is why what we believe at core about our faith is so important. What do we believe about Jesus' death on the cross? I sang for years and years because we inherit what we get from people. I sang for years and years songs about God's wrath, you know, and on the cross where Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. I grew up in a gospel that I was taught by others that said, God's angry. We're all sinners. There's nothing good within us, not a smidgen, not an iota of goodness left in us.
Mhm.
The question is, does Jesus' death count for us? And it only counts for us because God punishes Jesus instead of us. It's called penal substitution, as I'm sure you know.
Mhm.
God punishes Jesus and gets his blood so that we don't have to be punished, but it doesn't count unless you pray this prayer. And I came to the view that this cannot be an understanding of the love of God. It just seemed in such juxtaposed. What kind of father is God? Why should I seek to be like my heavenly Father if he can't let his anger go and he's got to get some revenge on somewhere? So I wrote a book, over 20 years ago called The Lost Message of Jesus, in which I said, I just can't understand the cross in that way. I'd learned, of course, that around the world, the majority of Christians through history have never understood the cross that way.
Mhm,
Have never
mhm.
understood the cross that way. I'll get into a lot of trouble for writing the book, by the way.
I'll bet.
I got to know Brian McLaren through it. Do you know
Oh,
Brian?
that's
Yeah.
great. I know Brian too.
Yes,
Okay.
Brian became my friend because he wrote a similar book at the same time as it
He
turned out.
did.
We've been friends through the years, and yeah, it's been fantastic. But if you believe that God is against most people, your
Mhm,
first thought is that you, as His representative, have got to change them in some way. Whereas if you believe that God is love, your first thought is you're going to love them.
mhm, mhm.
And
Yeah.
I've found it gets you a lot further.
Mhm,
And it's therapeutic and it's what works with the kids. Back to Oasis Restore. I sat down with someone else who came into Oasis Restore with four lads. Each of them, though unknown to the man who came in and sat with, he was great, but he didn't know this. Each of them uh, having murdered, some more than one person. But as they talked, he asked them this question. He said, "What's your relationship with your father?" None of them knew their father.
mhm,
So you're back to the lack of love, the lack of community, the lack of relationship, the lack of role modeling.
mhm, mhm.
And that's where we go from.
Mm. Steve, as we start to move a little bit towards the end here, I'm thinking about what would you want to be a message to American churches? Uh, there's so many pieces of what you're saying that are universal and beautiful, and I love hearing how it's expressed in this specific environment within England. But what would you want American churches to hear and follow, or replicate, or reproduce from how Oasis Restore functions?
I think that our gospel, the good news, the evangel, um, is more needed right now
Mm,
across the world and in the States than perhaps ever. I think that people hurt. I
mm,
think that they're lost. I think that they're struggling financially and socially. They're struggling psychologically. I think that young people are growing up in a world with no certainty, with endless doubt. I think that the education system and the health systems are failing far too many people.
mm,
I believe that the church in America has more buildings than any other institution,
mm,
more facilities than any other institution, I would guess.
mhm,
I think those buildings are in communities. They're round the corner, up the road, and I believe, therefore, with the facilities, with the with the infrastructure that the church has across the country, and with a love for ordinary people and a willingness to invest the best of what we have, which is our time,
mm,
most expensive commodity. Giving money is a good thing, but
mhm,
it can be, I give money, I won't give my time.
mhm.
What the person living next to you needs, Sam, the neighbors down your street, what do they need? Your time.
Yeah. Yeah. Or as we talk about in the evangelical world, your time, talent, and your treasure. But really, all of those wrapped up in relationship, which to your point is time. It's walking with people,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
what Jesus did.
yeah.
Yeah, 84 times he said, "Follow me." That's one thing I'm going to
Yeah.
take from this. I mean, he's
You
calling
better
us
check
to
that. I
community.
think it's 84, but you check it out. Yeah.
It's dozens. We know that. But yeah, it is that call to community, and that can look similarly regardless of country. Steve, I want to point people to a couple things, including you all's site, and I'll put these in the chat for those listening and watching. I'll also make sure this is in the notes that I'll send out to people. Please follow the Evangelical Network for EJUSA. You can hear about more events and conversations like this. I'll put that link there as well. You can read more and learn more about Oasis Restore. There's their site. And Steve, I really want to make sure that we point people to the work that's there, and I'll make sure to send that out for everybody. And I'll point to next month. Steve, I didn't tell you this, but the next conversation we're having in a way relates to some of the youth and the work at Oasis Restore. A woman named Angela Dinker here in the US has written a book called Disciples of White Jesus, The Radicalization of American Boyhood. And she's going to come on next month and talk about why and what is it about white American boys that often turns especially violent. How do we get here? And what role does the Christian church often play in that? So I'm going to talk with her next month in July about some of these things. And I know, Steve, that some of the root causes of what you're talking about are going to come up there. And then, Steve, I see you put in that link right there. I'll
Yeah,
grab that and make sure it's in the
yeah.
notes as well.
Well, if I just say what that is,
Please, absolutely.
so people ask me all the time how you build infrastructure. I mean, obviously, what I've talked about is the mission of Oasis, but there'd be people on this call who'd be saying, well, staffing and HR and IT and comms and due diligence and safeguarding and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I wrote a book. I wrote a book a year and a half ago, which is called A Manifesto for Hope, which is the 10 principles of leadership and building infrastructure. And a group in Florida, Christian group, have helped me turn it into a 10-session training course, academyforhope.org. It's got expert videos on it. I'm on it. It shows you, you'll see Oasis Restore actually. So it talks about the principle. I talk to
Mm,
an expert in that area. You see how this works out in practice in our houses, in our schools, in hospitals, wherever it is that we're working. And the great thing about it is, I think it's free. So the first one is completely free, and
okay.
then you can pay what you like for it, but you can pay $1 and get, you can do this as a group, you can do it across a year, you can do it in 10 weeks, but it's basically what we have learned through 40 years of building social infrastructure
Okay.
in a Christ-centered way.
Okay, great. Well, Steve, there's a lot that's here, but again, I think we can boil it down to relationship. This relationship with Jesus has led to these relationships with others, and it's so beautiful to see how it's expressed in all of these ways. I'm thankful for the work of Oasis and for your time. Thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this with us.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you,
Absolutely.
everyone. Thanks for
Yeah,
staying
thanks
in.
everyone for listening. All right, bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.